Welcome to the CatholicPsych Show. Welcome to the CatholicPsych Show. Here we are. We have a little tape delay when we start here. I'm psychologist Dr. Bryan Violette. I'm here with psychologist Dr. Bottaro. We are ambassadors of the Catholic Psych Institute, where we help people through accompaniment and mentorship address some of their psycho-spiritual issues, and we also teach people to do the same. Today on our live show, where we talk about current events, we're going to be discussing celebrity conversions. We're going to revisit some of the 60-minute interview with Pope Francis on the topic of immigration. And then a lot of other little chippy topics over this Memorial Day weekend. Dr. Greg, today is Memorial Day. How was your Memorial Day weekend?
It was awesome. I had an awesome weekend. I'm happy to talk about it. Almost, I've been waiting to hear about Storyland for your weekend. But we had some really good father-son time, camping. Yeah. I did this event in Connecticut, a men's, I don't know, they call it a retreat, but it's just like a big party, and it's like the most ridiculous men's party I've ever been at in the most amazing way. Ridiculous. So that was really fun. And then did some yard work, and it was a normal weekend as well.
What made the party so ridiculous? There's just a lot of meat, or what?
Yeah, so the thing is called a meet and greet. People in Connecticut, in central Connecticut, probably have heard of it if you're a Catholic and a man. If not, you should look it up. Meet and greet, MEAT. And they have these giant smoker grills with huge grates and everybody brings meat. So they had just overflowing coolers with all sorts of packages of meat just kind of flowing over. These two brothers just on the fire all day. And it was actually really good. I think a lot of the wives send guys with stuff, and so you'd see these tinfoil trays with really good Southern style macaroni and cheese. All different kinds of coleslaws and all that kind of barbecue stuff.
What did you bring? Did you bring anything?
Well, I was a speaker for the evening. Uh-huh. So I got to do a talk. So I brought myself.
What'd you talk about?
I talked about complementarity. I talked about the 3 ways that men have to become more like women.
We might have a surprise topic today. Do I just redo the talk right now? What ways do we need to become more like women?
No, I'm not going to. I'm not. This is a current event show. We're not. That's okay. For the podcast.
I will put that behind a paywall.
Yeah, exactly. as soon as we construct it. So speaking of walls, so these guys, Sam Taj had set this up with a bunch of other guys there in Connecticut, and he went to the dump and had them pulling out file cabinets for the last year. And he constructed a 3-story Minecraft style file cabinet monster. This thing was massive. And nice. And it was held together by 2x4s drilled into the sides, and then in wood that was nail gun shut through it to construct this whole thing. So it was feet, a central torso, arms that stuck out, this big head on top. And then they made this giant sword and a giant shield. So it looked like this giant monster made out of file cabinets that was 3 stories high. And then they make potato guns, and they made this giant 3-barrel cannon with gas. And they made these cannons that they fired 2x4s out of. And so for the first hour of the evening, they were just taking shots at this file cabinet monster.
Well, so when I say what kind of ridiculous things happened, you buried the lead. You started talking about me. This is what I want to hear about. This is ridiculous.
Well, the meet and greet, that was not the ridiculous part. I mean, that was great, but no.
Yeah.
And so that was just one example. That wasn't even the real games of the night. They had this relay race with an old VW Bug that you start off on the top of the hill, and they have different teams, and then teams were broken up into sections. And so one section would push the VW down the hill, and then it had to go over a ramp. By the way, 2 people were driving inside, like steering.
Sounds safe.
And there's like no engine in the VW, so it's just like super light, and they're pushing it down this hill over a jump. And
the
then
brakes work?
I don't know if the brakes worked or not, but probably not. And then once they got to the bottom, another group shoved poles. They drilled 2 giant holes into the sides of the VW, and then they had 2 rods with, so 4 groups of people, 2 on each side, lift up the VW over some logs, spin it around 180 over the logs again, and then line it back up on the next section. And then this other crew would come in and push it around this obstacle course. And then they had to get to this finish line and then see how far they could propel it unmanned. And that was the full course. This is
timed?
So this is timed, and then by distance on the last leg to see how far you could actually push it. So that was just one games event.
Wow.
I mean, ridiculous.
Did you participate in this, or were you just...
I did not participate at that point.
You're getting ready for your talk.
I was preparing. I was actually, I saw a bunch of guys there that I haven't seen. One guy came up to me after my talk from high school.
Oh, wow.
And I haven't seen him literally since high school.
Oh, that's cool.
And so it just turns out that I went to high school kind of close by in the area, and he's lived in the area. And it's always surprising when I meet people from high school. It was a Catholic high school, but surprising when I meet people that are still like into their faith
in the area.
And he married another girl.
What a sad commentary.
It's so sad.
Surprising when I meet people that are still into their faith in Connecticut.
From high school, yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like I went to Steubenville. It's like, oh, I meet people from Steubenville, like they were there for their faith. Like, that's not as surprising. But East Catholic High School, Manchester, Connecticut. It's like, how many people there are still into their faith? I don't know. But this guy, he married a girl from our class. He's like, oh yeah, she's catechesis, CCD teacher, 4 kids. They're altar servers. They're awesome. All this stuff. I'm like, this is so cool. Like, what a beautiful, hopeful thing. So, anyways, that was fun, and I gave a talk on the complementarity piece, and cool. People have to find other. We're not going to open up the 3 ways that men are supposed to be more like women. I'm going to leave that till somewhere else.
Somewhere else. Cool. Well, it's great that the meat lure all the men out, the good Catholic men out.
Yeah, and so how about you?
Yeah, also had a ridiculous weekend. I was at Storyland. It was one of those weekends where you really have to focus on others in order to get through it. It's like, when if you're scared of heights and you're climbing a ladder, they say, don't look down. Like, if you look down, you're going to be scared. Like, if I thought about myself at all this weekend, I would have plummeted to my own death because it was a lot of kid stuff. A lot of kid stuff. Storyland is great. Highly recommend it for ages 3 to 5, though. Really great. Really great. It was a lot of rides.
Unpack that.
Well, I mean, there's only so it's an amusement park essentially. And it's focused on younger stories, like fairy tale, storybook kind of themes. My daughter went to tea time with Cinderella. We had teacup rides, and the most adult ride is a roller coaster it's like a dinosaur themed roller coaster. But then there's one level below. It's like a introductory roller coaster that my son went on. It was his first roller coaster ever, which was great. He loved it. I think people either love or hate roller coasters. I assume you're someone that loves them.
No, I'm not actually.
No way. I'm shocked. I thought you'd just be like mindfully unaffected by the roller coasters. Just
the older I get, my physical constitution is weakening.
Yes.
So my stomach does not do well on roller coasters.
Yes. So my son went on that. That was great. I went on these Dutch shoes that go around in a circle with him. We went on the bamboo kind of like shoot down it's like a big water drop and you get wet at the bottom. Best ride in the whole thing. So my brother-in-law, my sister, and my son are on this boat that slowly moves around in kind of like a circular like track, and they're just
Okay.
moving real slow. And they each have like huge water pistols on their
Oh
boat.
yeah, that's fun.
And then there's people on the outside, right? Just pedestrians who can grab water pistols as well. But
Nice.
you don't even have to be. I mean, you just be walking by and just get nailed by someone on the ride, just like drilled with all this water. And so it's like this whole water fight. I was soaked. It was a lot of fun. I was just running from water to cannon, water cannon, and shooting them. So
That's awesome.
it was good. It was a lot of fun, young stuff. It's a beautiful White Mountains of New Hampshire, which is just a gorgeous landscape. We stayed up there for 2 nights, and it was good.
That's awesome.
We got through it. Got home last night, and I'm here.
All right, so we went to Great Wolf Lodge together. How does it compare to Great Wolf Lodge?
Great Great Wolf Lodge. I mean, they're in the same league. It's probably the same type of experience. I mean, the good thing is if you go to these parks early in the day, you can avoid the lines. And so we didn't spend a lot of time in lines, so that was great. Great Wolf Lodge was pretty chaotic the entire time.
Yeah.
Because people are like, it's a hotel too, so people are just there.
Yeah.
Whereas the park, it was Memorial Day weekend, it was opening weekend, so it wasn't like the summer rush.
Yeah.
People Memorial Day, they're like cooking hot dogs and stuff, so they weren't really focused on Storyland. So it wasn't too busy, but it was busy enough. So in that sense, it was a better experience. And
Cool.
Here we are.
Here we are.
Back in the saddle, ready to talk about the news. You ready?
All right, what's up for today?
All right, so I want to talk about celebrity conversions. We've seen a bunch recently. Big names: Shia LaBeouf, Candace Owens, Russell Brand. In some ways, Mark Wahlberg. I don't think he had a conversion, but he had a reversion when he became serious about his faith a few years back. And in general, I'd like to hear your opinion and your perspective or your impressions, reaction to all these conversions, where you think they're coming from, how you feel about them. And then Bishop Barron had some things to say about these conversions as well.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure that my opinion on conversions in general is really there. It's awesome. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah.
I'm always a little leery of putting too much emphasis on celebrity culture in general anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I think faith is so deep and personal and intimate that we can almost objectify people and not really reverence enough like what what a person's relationship with God is really, by sort of sensationalizing all of it. But in general, it's great. I mean, I think the more people that are making a sort of positioning faith as a serious thing, something to take seriously, the better. So when you have thought leaders and influencers, being out there with the word and with their own witness of giving their life to something, then it certainly is a good thing for us.
Yeah. I think of it more as like part of the cultural battle. And so there's enough anti-Catholic or anti-Christian or anti-faith sentiment out there in the world of Hollywood and in celebrity life, which I find discouraging because I do love the arts and I want to be able to feel connected with the artists, with the actors, and the popular personalities. It's discouraging to me. So that when I discover that someone whom I do respect from an artistic standpoint comes out and has the courage to come out and talk about their conversion and talk about a lived faith, I just find that as a deeply inspiring example. It feels like the world is not absolutely hopeless. There's this dark tidal wave of, secularism or atheism that's just threatens to engulf us. We have some voices who have platforms that are willing to say, no, it's okay. It's okay to be artistic. It's okay to have a platform, and it's okay to also be Catholic and to have a voice. So I hear you with the sensationalism, if that's like one part of it, but I appreciate the witness of it.
What about, I'm reading this book from Monsignor Shea from University of Mary. Right. And he got real famous over the summer. Was it over the summer? Where are we now? No, it was recently.
It's May.
I think it was more recently than last summer, but it was the Sikh conference. Maybe that was the winter. I forget.
And that's the Steubenville conference?
No, Seek conference, like for Focus.
Oh, Focus, yeah.
And
For those who don't know, Focus is it's a group of campus ministers, Association of
I feel
Campus
like more
Ministers.
I feel like more of our listeners know
What Focus is
than you do.
I think it's something to do with
our
college
listeners already
and
knew Seek was part
Catholicism,
of
and
Focus.
they talk about Jesus while drinking coffee, something like that. I don't know what they do.
So Monsignor Shea gave this talk. It's a really good talk. On it was like a half hour, 25 minutes. It was amazing how it kind of went viral. And there's usually one talk from Seek that, or a moment from Seek that'll kind of go viral for a week. So Monsignor Shea was this year's, and anyways, he's an amazing guy. He's the president of University of Mary, and I've known him before because of his interest in Catholic mindfulness, and we've done some stuff out there together. And he wrote this book called From Christendom to Apostolic Time.
Right.
And it's a very short book. I recommend it. And I think it's really important for us to read it and understand what he's saying here. And he's basically saying that there's this pendulum swing between two kinds of general culture. And it's like when Christ came into the world and first picked out the apostles and started, that was apostolic times. In general, the culture necessarily wasn't Christian. Right. And then there was, conversions happened, and then eventually you have Christendom emerge.
So it's like a time of evangelization where you're
time of evangelization.
Yeah.
And then Christendom happens, and then you have like hundreds of years of just like permeation of culture, permeation of everything from arts and music and leisure and the way that things are just ordered towards goodness and truth and beauty. And but we have to recognize which time we're in, and then act accordingly. And so I think, and the main point of his book is like we have to open our eyes and realize we are in an apostolic time.
Yeah,
we are not in Christendom, but we're coming out of a time when there was more of an accepted Christian kind of ethos in culture. So it's interesting how like this kind of thing surprises some people or shocks people or consoles people or gives people hope. It's like I think if we had a general sense that we're actually in apostolic times, then we just expect that nobody's going to be supportive of our faith.
Oh,
why would they? It's like people wouldn't ever know that our faith is our faith, like that it's our faith, that it's an option.
They don't understand it from within.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a great point. I still rejoice in it, though. You still rejoice. I think even in apostolic times, right, when conversions happened, people would rejoice in the conversion, in martyrdom, in sanctity, in the other followers of Christ when it became more popular, because there's a natural human response to being in apostolic times, which is one of loneliness. Like it's hard to be in apostolic times in a certain way. It's in a time of Christendom, it's difficult because it's not the same, I guess, draw to live a life of holiness. Right. If the whole culture is
that's Shay's point, is like you take it for granted and then you become really disintegrated because you can like on the surface you're just doing this thing, it's all it's all just common.
Yeah.
And it's accepted. But internally, so people are like really disintegrated and maybe are not living a life of virtue.
Yeah, right. It's like on a large scale, it's better psychologically to be in the Christendom time, right? But it's better spiritually to be in an apostolic time.
Exactly.
Even though it hurts you more, it's like better for your soul. And we think about our own times of spiritual growth, right? It's when we're called to trust God in some of the darkest moments. That's where we make a lot of progress.
I would almost say that there's like it's the transition that's psychologically difficult. I think that if we actually shift over to the next phase, like if you look at the apostles, like when you're in the apostolic time, really, then we can like find deep camaraderie and deep friendship and and that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
I think that that's important to see, like that Shay's points. Like, let's get out of this like transitionary period, and then
Yeah.
we'll take it really seriously, and then we can feel really supported in our friendships and in
Like
our church community.
it gives us clarity in terms of knowing what to do rather
Sure.
than feeling like lukewarm between these two poles.
Right.
You know, um, I love this comment by Catherine Marsh. We're talking about the celebrity conversions.
Yeah.
When your conversion happens on the world stage, I wonder how free people (parentheses celebrities) feel to be able to go through the ups and downs of new conversion life. That's such a great point, right? A conversion, like that's the first step. It's
Yeah.
the first step, and especially there's that early phase where someone's completely on fire. And I remember when I first had my reversion to the faith in my early 20s, I was devouring theological and spiritual books. I was going to mass like without fail every single day, doing holy hours, praying 3-4 hours a day. Like I was on fire, right? And that's great, and that's really important. It's like the puppy love stage of conversion. But then like life comes back, you slide backwards, you fall, you give into temptation, you have a different, your relationship with Christ evolves, it deepens, but it's not as emotional, and it's just a whole kind of landscape of
Yeah.
ups and downs, of peaks and valleys in your spiritual life, and you're called to stay faithful even though you don't have that emotional high of the early stage. Here these celebrities are converting, and they may be on fire and being ready to stand up for their faith right now, but people are going to be scrutinizing every little thing they do. And how free can they be to open up about doubts or failings, or it's going to be complete black and white thinking in regard to them. And so the normal trajectory of the spiritual life is going to be probably be used against them. It's a great point.
Yeah, it's crazy how much scrutiny there is. And you look at somebody like Shia LaBeouf, and it's like, he was he has his history of his really erratic behavior, and his outbursts and his violence and stuff like that from his past. I'm sure people are just like waiting. It's like, oh, did his, oh, he did Padre Pio. He had the conversion through the Capuchins. Like, did he?
Yeah.
He was with Bishop Barron. Like,
Yeah.
well, we'll see. And then as soon as
See
he
if it
does
lasts.
one little thing, they're like,
I know.
see, that's
Well,
not real.
I mean, what's so interesting too, that we embrace the integration of psychology and faith at Catholic Psych. That's the whole point
Yeah.
of our whole institute. And the videos and interviews I've seen with Shia LaBeouf about his conversion are very psychological.
Oh yeah.
He talks about feeling like worthless and that he's like unworthy of forgiveness, and
Yeah.
you could tell like there's a lot of trauma. He's a childhood actor, and so his faith is mingled in his psychology, like in a way that's probably inextractable for him right now. And so
Yeah.
yeah, it's important like during that early phase of conversion to feel as if God is attending to all your psychological needs. But
Yeah.
that is not our spiritual life long term. I wonder like if there's a certain lability to his spiritual life right now because it's so like entangled with his emotion, that it's going to be tough moving forward, or he has to at least be attending to it regularly and you know purifying that faith.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm looking at some of the comments here. Catherine says that Patrick Lencioni likes to say people don't actually hate change. We love change and new and novelty things, but we're resistant to the process of transition. And so yeah, going back to that apostolic thing, but I think even just in the pre and post conversion, it's like, all right, so yeah, so like there's this, it's how much are we in flux right now, and how much do people not trust transition? People don't trust change, and so it's like, yeah, we'll see where this goes. But we also like to think about a culture of change. We call it a culture of conversion,
Yeah.
and people are constantly. We always have to be looking for the new thing, and the new step of growth.
Yeah.
If we're not growing, then we're gonna end up becoming stale, and that's so I think that's built into our DNA.
Yeah, it's like those people that talk about being lifelong learners. I always want to learn new things. Like we emphasize like lifelong growing. Like
Yeah.
life becomes more interesting if you're constantly trying to change rather than
Yeah.
staying in this static place. But I'm reminded of, we always talk about this in the Catholic world about the Israelites leaving Egypt, right? It's like the promise of the the land of milk and honey. They got
Yeah.
into the desert, and it's like, wait a minute, maybe slavery was better.
Yeah.
And I think that can happen and does happen to all of us in our spiritual lives, where we're tempted to, as it gets hard, want to go back to the way things work. We forget how the bondage that we were once in.
We're so fickle. it's always so temporary. Wait, so what did Bishop Barron say? He has a recent comment on this?
Yeah, he said a few things here. He said, his first quote is, "There is more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than 90 righteous persons who need no repentance." So obviously quoting there.
Okay.
Noting that Brand is a public figure, Barron said that he's talking about Russell Brand here, one of
Yeah.
the major conversions. It's not really shocking that his conversion is a public matter. And given, again, in Brand's own words, quote, this is Brand's words, "For someone like me associated with a decadent, hedonistic lifestyle, a move like this is surprising." Barron went on to say, "I would add, for some, it is also unsettling because it reminds us that Christ himself revealed that his primary mission is the reconciliation of sinners.
Mm.
And as such, this is the mission of Christ's followers as well. The church is not a closed society for the perfectly virtuous."
Mm.
Thank God for that, because I wouldn't be invited. But is instead a refuge for sinners. I always get angry at the whole kind of us Catholics versus those sinners mentality, or us Christians versus those sinners. Like, we're the sinners. Like, we're sinners too. The church there's a refuge for sinners. It's about conversion. It's about growth. It's about change. Just because you start to live a life of faith doesn't mean you don't screw up again.
Well, isn't that so relatable to what we're just talking about? Because it's acceptance of change. This is what people don't like change. They don't like the discomfort of transition. So that's why I think underlying a lot of people's resistance to setting a standard that's beyond what they feel capable of right now.
Yeah.
When it's like, oh, you should stop doing XYZ. It's like, oh, don't moralize on me. Don't put your stuff on me. It's like, what's really underneath that? Is it really a difference of faith, or is it a difference of acceptance of the challenge of changing, and maybe not being perfect, and not just switching, like all of a sudden tomorrow we're going to be perfect, or today if we make a decision, now we're perfect, or now we're doing everything we said we're going to do. How about like we're works in progress?
Yeah. It's true.
It seems like that's the theme of today. It's like, what is the progress here? What's the work in progress?
And if someone is a believer and they know they don't want, or they can't change, or not willing to change, but they actually do believe in their heart, and it's, as you say, a question of not wanting to change, then they may feel guilt about that reluctance to change. And the dissonance regarding feeling all that guilt becomes a rejection of faith altogether. It's like, I can't possibly believe this is true because I can't. They may subjectively feel like they can't change, or they don't want to change. And the feeling that's left over as a result, the guilt, means that must be wrong. I can't follow a faith that's one that causes me to feel guilt.
Isn't it interesting too, like the Protestant idea of predestination, and some of that, when they sort of the retrospective judgment, where it's like, oh, if somebody says they were saved but then led a life of sin, well, then they were actually never saved. Or, we really don't know till the end, but the end always, it's like, well, then, you were predestined if you end up living this righteous life. And then we know if you were or were not. And even in that perspective, there's a splitting apart of like, can't handle this both and, like, work in progress. Like, I'm both setting a standard that's high in terms of like living a virtuous life, and realizing I am saved. That means I'm on the path of being a work in progress. That being saved means that the bridge has been built and I've been welcomed onto it, and I'm walking on that bridge now.
I know. Yeah. And I can't help but think about like the sort of narcissistic ranking of the self in relation to others. And this is why people like to see celebrities fall, because if someone else is falling, if someone else is making mistakes, if they're living a life of vice or whatever, they're psychologically problematic, then I can feel better about me.
Yeah.
Right. So if I'm going to, like in the example you gave, if I'm going to judge other people, they are not saved because of the mistakes that they're making in life. I can feel better about myself. And I feel it assuages my own interior, even unconscious guilt or shame about the life that I'm living. So I'm going to rank myself like, if I look at them living a life of holiness and virtue, then they're above me and I feel bad about myself. But I can't wait till they fall, because now I can feel better about me because they're below me. which we reject the entire paradigm, right? Like we don't agree with any of that. All the
Right,
presuppositions.
right.
Each person is on their own unique path to God, which includes, falling and getting up and falling and getting up. You don't want to judge people's level of holiness, personal holiness.
No, of course. I mean, at the end of the day, nobody knows the battles that other people are actually fighting internally, and some people might be heroes of their life if
Yeah.
you really knew what they're struggling with. Adrian asked about what do you say to somebody that wants God to attend to psychological needs, and I feel like that's another kind of work in progress kind of answer. Even to answer that question, this is something I've been thinking more about in terms of our psychology, a Catholic psychology, a Catholic standard of psychology. And we have some of our psychology that's sort of more biologically based, some of our psychology that's related to our spiritual life. And it's not easy to put the box out there to say which is which and how much is one or how much is the other, because Taylor asks about like OCD and scrupulosity. Like, there's a great example. Some of that is just basic biological sort of causes. And like, no matter how much faith you have, no matter how much you pray, no matter how much you grow in holiness, you're not going to necessarily be changing your biology in a positive direction when our biology is ordered towards, at least is moving towards death.
Yeah. And I would add too, even sometimes we don't have access to the psychological mechanisms that are making us behave a certain way, not just the biology, but just even unconscious processes.
Right.
I mean, if you have a visceral reaction to something and your anxiety levels go up, you don't even know why, because it's based on some kind of childhood trauma. That happens to me like going to Storyland this weekend with going on a roller coaster. Like the thought of going on a roller coaster made me really anxious. And I'm not sure exactly why. I mean, I've had some experiences on roller coasters. Maybe it's about control issues or, whatever it may be. I don't know. But like, I'm not consciously engaging in thought about roller coasters. My body's just like, whoa, that's loud and scary.
Yeah.
So it's the biological, but the unconscious processes as well, that until we address them, until we go through them, there's lots of unconscious processes that are happening in our life.
Right. Yeah. So that's where we have to be okay with this work in progress, even in our concept of how we separate out the psychological and the spiritual and the biological. But we also know they're all overlapping and they all definitely play into each other. So we can grow spiritually. And for a lot of people, growing spiritually does help to have deeper peace. And, this is what I think is a really beautiful way to think about it. It's like you can have more peace about having less psychological health.
Yes.
So we can grow in peace. We can grow, and that will actually reduce anxiety.
Yes.
And it'll bring down the anxiety and bring down depression. But it might be that we're having more peace about more anxiety in different parts of our life, or different ways that we feel anxiety, or different kinds of trauma responses, or things that God has allowed by His providence to be a part of our life.
Yeah, the secondary reactive anxiety, which is compounding the initial one, starts to diminish. We have lots of saints who are nuts,
right?
but they were saints. They had significant mental health issues, but their relationship to those issues was one.
Another great book to recommend is called The Context of Holiness by and the author escapes me, but look up it's about Saint Therese of Lisieux, and it just gives like a psychological evaluation of her family history, her actual constitution. I mean, she was diagnosable, to say the least. She probably would have been institutionalized today.
Yeah.
And in terms of where she was coming from in her childhood psychology, but she became a saint because of it, not despite it, but because of it. And it was her acceptance of the path that God had put in her life that she's a saint.
This is Therese you're talking about?
Yeah, Therese.
Oh yeah. Yeah, she sublimated a lot of her attachment issues, right? Like she took her attachment issues that go all the way back to her childhood and like basically said, well, only God's going to fulfill these needs, this big hole in my heart.
Yeah, so she redirected it. Yeah, thanks, Adrian. Father Mark Foley was the author of that book. So definitely look that up.
I want to add this Bishop Barron quote too, which I think is really helpful, at least with regard to Russell Brand. it speaks to everything we're talking about. Many Christians will recognize. Okay, hold on, let me go back. Barron said that he found Brand's explanation for religious awakening to be, quote, striking, quoting the Englishman's statement that the figure, the personage, the presence of Christ became overwhelming, unavoidable, welcome, and necessary. This apparent quickening of faith in the Lord Jesus compelled him to seek baptism. Many Christians will recognize in Brand's testimony a similar experience, Barron said, but they will also see in Brand's acknowledgement of his own continued imperfections the truth that we're all sinners who are the recipients of an amazing, undeserved grace. Yeah, Brand isn't coming out and saying, I'm Christian now, I'm good. He comes from the addictions world and the substance abuse world and the recovery world. So it's just this constant opening up and revealing of one's shortcomings. So if you hear him talk about his faith, he's like, if I don't wake up every day and say my prayers and my rosary, I will fall back. You know, he's constantly acknowledging his shortcomings. And that's what we're talking about here. He's not a finished project.
There's something really there is something really striking about Russell Brand coming to closer to the faith, because he like is very different from Shia LaBeouf, which you can kind of, and I don't want to take away from his conversion at all. Like, praise God
Shia
for
LaBeouf's
his personality type, Shia LaBeouf's personality type, his history, his experience, his path. Like, praise God for that. And it's an awesome example for a lot of people who are probably in the same personality dimension.
Sure.
But he went from like super hardcore one way to super hardcore another way. And his other, you know, his approach is like the Latin Mass is the only place where you can, that's where you see beauty. That's where you experience it. And like, forget Latin Mass. That's not even the only kind of, it's just extreme. Like the Capuchin lifestyle, you know, it's like all in. It's like, I definitely can relate to that. Some parts of me, I'm like, if I'm going to be holy, like I might as well be Franciscan, you know, it's like I might as well be a celibate and live 3 vows and be
hair
austere.
shirts. Are you wearing a hair shirt under that smoking jacket?
Yes. So, but Russell Brand comes at it from this totally other dimension of like loosey-goosey kind of new agey sort of like into like all the stuff, and his, you know, his
searching for beauty. He's like God as beauty.
Yeah, but he's also like, he's got this softer, more open, more welcoming kind of approach to everything.
Yes.
And when you come out of that, addictions aside, it just is like, okay, it's a little bit more palpable and palatable that, you know, that he's like, you know, presenting this thing. And then, but so here's the striking thing though. It's like, he's still promoting Christianity. Like, he's baptized. So he's actually
praying the rosary every day.
Well, praying the rosary. But even then, like when he first started the rosary, that was like his old style. Like, this is a beautiful thing. I don't even really know the words, but he didn't know the word, you know, he didn't know what chant really meant. It's like,
he says, this is what you chant. It's like,
now let's chant the rosary. I was like, oh, this is going to be interesting. But then he just like recites the rosary. Yeah. And it's like, it's very like endearing, right? And it's this beautiful man. Like, he really is a beautiful person. Yeah. Just seeking, open to truth, open to beauty, open to goodness, trying to understand. He's on this journey. And then he crosses over. He's baptized.
In the Thames River, by the way. So there's something to be said. It's not the most Catholic of baptisms.
Well, it's Catholic though, right? Was he he's baptized in the Catholic Church?
No, he hasn't said which denomination of Christian he is, and he was baptized.
Interesting.
He was baptized by Bear Grylls, who's an evangelical. He was the witness to the baptism. So,
I did not know that.
No, but he's praying the rosary, which is obviously very Catholic. And I've heard him talk about trying a bunch of different Catholic churches. Honestly, my opinion, I think he ends up in an Orthodox faith. That's my opinion.
A lot of these guys are.
Yeah.
You know, there's this awesome iconographer artist, Jonathan Pajot, who is friends with Jordan Peterson.
Yep.
So Pajot's he's Orthodox. He's been on podcasts with like Bishop Barron and you know and Peterson, And he and a lot of people I've seen that, like, it's the beauty aspect of it that's drawing people. When you come in
Of the Orthodox Christianity.
yeah, and if you're
Yeah.
coming to Christianity through that beauty door, the Eastern version of Christianity is a lot more approachable.
Yeah, bells and smells and it's I think it is a bit more austere than mainstream Catholicism. It makes demands on you in much more of a public way. I
Yeah,
mean,
I think
there's
it
sect. I mean, obviously, there's different brands of Catholicism and different charisms, and some are more or less austere. But I think Orthodoxy in general really makes demands on you in a public way.
yeah, I do, and I think, also
And
it does
with his personality. My point though is his personality for what he needs for the rigidity in order to not fall backwards. I think that's what's going to attract him to the
yeah,
Orthodox
and
faith.
you could almost see that as what it's like the Latin Mass people are that's like the Western version of that approach to beauty.
Yes.
Because it's like
Yes.
smells and bells still, but it's like with a westernized kind of structure around it instead of this sort of like Eastern mysteriousness and the mysticism around it. That
I
was
saw.
actually part of my talk, talking about complementarity.
Oh, nice.
And
I
so, and I, that you think about it, it's like, what are the three ways that men need to be more like women? Actually, we can sort of extrapolate from that. It's like, what are three ways that, the West needs to be more like the East?
hmm
And we can draw out. So I think there's a lot to learn from these different personality types coming in to their faith.
Yeah. I just listened to a podcast this past weekend called Plain English. It's a very good podcast. I don't support or advocate for everything that's on that podcast, but it takes very complex ideas and makes them and simplifies them. And the episode that I saw was talking about um, in the decline of religion, how much of society is built on cults. And he defines cults in a very specific way, which looks at um, a willing not only is there kind of like a congregating around a certain idea. I mean, even capitalist cults, but it has to be willing to suffer at for a certain set of ideals in rejection of the larger mainstream culture.
Mm.
And he talked about us how more austere religious faiths, more strict religion is actually growing, whereas more open-ended kind of inclusive religious faiths are dying. And he says, like, he's a secular journalist, but he was shocked at the paradox of what he believed to be a paradox of this, which is that as all of religion is declining, what he's discovered is that like kind of open-ended inclusive religion is actually dying, but those who are challenged to grow and be a part of something very um, demanding is what people are looking for at a deep level, and that's what they're attracted to.
I think an argument can be made that everything happening in culture can fit into that description right now.
Hmm.
Like, I think that's why the left is so hardcore and so exclusive and so, it's like you have to follow the rules. You have to say the right words. I mean, think about it. Like all the woke liberalism stuff, all the gender ideology stuff. It's like you have to have the right language. You have to say the right words. Do it the right way. It's so orthodox in that way. It's like do it the right way, the one teaching, the one way, the one truth.
It is the framework of religion.
It's
Though
the framework. It's exactly what we're made for.
It's a skinned with a political ideology on top of it. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's it's a constitutional. It's like the constitutional level of the human person that wants to follow the right way of doing things. And without faith, we're going to find one specific way that we believe to be the right way to do things, rather than being kind of open-ended and more universal in the way we approach life. We want a path. We want to know which way to go.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're going to find that if we don't
It
have
is
faith.
interesting. That is kind of this swing too. It's like we've gone from like let's discredit and hold in suspicion everything that comes from the older generation, all of this like sort of postmodern relativistic way of doing things, and then it's like that's kind of starting to fall apart. People are starting to reject that.
Well, I'm just sitting here thinking, if you think about the developmental stages of a human being, of a human person, right? When we go into our adolescent phase of life, we have to pretty soon we're going to wake up and be adults, and so we start pushing back on all the traditionalism of our parents.
Yeah.
right? Like it's like I want my independence. I want to break free from them. Everything they say is wrong. It's like we all become like miniature iconoclasts and are in the search for independence and identity during adolescent life. And
Yeah.
then we get through that phase, and it's like, wait, mom and dad, how do I pay bills? How do I buy a house? How do I raise kids? It's like that. Once you realize that, like, okay, you want independence? Good
Yeah.
luck out there. It's a scary place. The world's a difficult place. And then you
Right.
come back around and you look for that tradition once again.
Yeah.
It happens on an individual level, but it's also kind of happening on a cultural level.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. Yeah. So it's interesting.
So we got some thoughts in the chat here. Taylor, after being received into the church after 17 years of marriage to my Catholic wife, a change in me occurred such that I felt drawn to the religious state. Reason prevailed. Years of fruitful works. It's great.
That's great. Yeah, reason prevailed.
Reason prevailed.
Don't leave your wife to go join religious life. That's not the right path.
Okay. Catherine Marsh, agree Eastern Catholicism and Orthodoxy has preserved so much gentle holding of mystery and beauty. I love that. And not all togetherness, quote, that is a wildflower garden beautiful, especially liturgically. Yeah, that's great. Okay. JBS, I love y'all's talks. Y'all's, you must be from New York City. Do you guys have a podcast on Spotify or any streaming services? We are going to put this on Spotify. You can, on Spotify. You can. All the replays for this are on YouTube. You can check us out on Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn, right?
And Facebook Live, we're on there.
And Facebook Live. Yeah, and you can. This is listed as a podcast under YouTube also. So there's a YouTube app where you can play just the audio. There's a secondary YouTube app, so you can get the podcast that way until we start uploading these episodes on Spotify. It's on the list
It'll
of things
probably
to do.
go out to iTunes, Apple Podcast as well. We'll put it out as a podcast. We're still kind of in the building phase right now, but
this is actually the pilot. So
this is a pilot right now. So, but for everybody listening, you guys, we'd love to support. Subscriptions on YouTube, subscribe and follow, and all that fun stuff on Instagram. We were kind of testing this out to see what kind of response we got. So if we continue to get this kind of good response, then we'll put more resources towards this and spend more time here.
Yeah, and of course we saw Chris James's comments earlier today about the phone number not working, the phone call and working. It is our goal to get the phones working, and I know it can feel a little frustrating not to be able to call in, but you have to understand too, we're doing something totally unique for which there actually is no software. To have two people live streaming from separate places and then streaming that out to multiple platforms and having a software that allows us to call in where we can hear the caller and the caller hears us. That doesn't exist.
Yeah,
so maybe we're trying our best to make that work. And so it kind of works with Zoom, but the resolution quality of Zoom is terrible. So we're using a different software.
The Mike Gary on Instagram, says, do you guys teach a lot about Thomistic psychology? Where can mental health professionals go learn more about it? That's a great question. The Mike, we build a lot on a Thomistic personalism. So we would look at John Paul II really as the flourishing of Thomism as a contemporary approach. And John Paul II really did open up a full psychology of the human person. And we are building that now. As we speak, I am writing a book. We are putting out content. In fact, the podcast, the Being Human podcast this week is going to be specifically about that. So if you're still listening, check out the Being Human podcast this week. I'm going to introduce that a little bit more. And so Cindy also says that the notification came in about 10 minutes.
Wait, hold on. We got to give a little teaser. We got to give a little teaser about what separates us entirely from a Thomistic psychology, right? Or how we focus more on the Catholic anthropology of John Paul II. What is the essential difference between a purely Thomistic psychology?
Well, the essential difference is that, I mean, it's not even a difference, it's an application. No. I would say it's applying Thomistic principles to man of today, to the contemporary world, which is what John Paul II did. And so he embraced phenomenology as a contemporary philosophy, and then made
Right.
sense of it with a Thomistic foundation, and said, okay, well, so something like this is maybe shocking, but it's the subconscious and unconscious is not something really understood through strict Thomism. And
Right.
so we, like how could you build a psychology without understanding consciousness or the unconscious mind? What's
Yes.
happening in that weird, esoteric, kind of dark and shadowy world. And so those are kinds of things that came up from the 20th century.
Yep.
And especially after Freud. And John Paul II made sense of it. And, more than that, he also already won the battle that we're all fighting right now. We alluded to postmodern relativism, but specifically in the form of communism. And John Paul II already beat communism.
Dismantled.
He completely dismantled it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, I think this is just really important to. I heard my parish priest is from Poland, and he gave a homily. I think it wasn't Divine Mercy Sunday, but it was about Divine Mercy. Maybe it was Faustina's feast day or something. But he said John Paul II during communism was preaching in Krakow, and he was saying something about divine mercy, and he was saying there's a prayer that's in the liturgy that's something about may freedom come to this land or to this place, or let this place speak of freedom or something like that. It was like whatever the translation was, but my priest said that John Paul II, while he's saying the mass, and of course the Communist Party have spies that are there in Poland while he's there, and they're it's like this, he's enemy number one to the communist state. And John Paul II paused on this land and he puts his finger out and he points down and he's like, on this land may freedom be present, whatever that line was. And he kind of like looked at where the spies were. And he just stares him down, and he's like, and there's like a couple seconds of silence, it's like, what are you gonna do about it? I'm just praying the mass. So he already beat communism. He understood what he was doing, and he built a whole philosophy and psychology around that. So that's why we're sticking with him.
Yeah, and this idea of his philosophy, which is the Christian personalism, which you mentioned briefly about the connection between Thomism and phenomenology. In short, what does that mean? Those are big words. And it means essentially meeting people where they are through their phenomenological or their experience where they are, and help like drawing from that what aligns with what we believe to be true from a Catholic position, which was laid out by St. Thomas Aquinas. So it's the both and the poles of both being true, like sort of Thomism on its own, which is just a sort of it's a series of statements about what we believe essentially, versus the phenomenological, which on its own has no grounding in abstract truth. But when the two come together, that's his philosophy. That's Christian personalism. I think the other big thing to emphasize also about JP2 and about our model drawing from JP2 for our Catholic psychology is the focus on relationality, on relationships.
Right.
And how it's not Thomistic thought can be very cognitive. It can be a focus on ideas and the intellectual side of things, which is wonderful. But our emphasis is that even that is embedded in patterns of relating to other people and relationality. There's no me without you. I find everything in relationship. God reveals himself to us as three persons in relationship.
Listen,
So
real quick. I'm
deal.
looking at Steady Ascend on Instagram is asking questions about further education on these issues, and it says, I'm 29 with a kid on the way, and I've fallen in love with psych and Catholicism. Advice for people wanting to go back to school. Well, interestingly enough, Steady Ascend. She also said I was looking at Divine Mercy, $74K a year. I did not realize that. Wow,
our alma mater.
That much when we were there. But we actually have a certification program that we launched It is not even close to how much that one cost, but you could go to CatholicPsych.com and click on the big button that says, I want to help. We have two essential services that we offer at Catholic Psych. One is helping people who are looking for help, and the other is training people who want to help others. And we bring together psychology with philosophy of the human person and the spirituality based on traditional Catholic thought. So go check out CatholicPsych.com and click I want to help and learn about our CPMAP certification program. And it was a great question. Thanks for asking that.
Yeah.
How are we doing? Oh, we're close to the end of time here. How did we?
Yeah.
That just blew by.
I know. I don't know.
I did want to comment. Cindy Gallagher on YouTube said, I've enjoyed this live stream. Just let you know, the email notification came in about 10 minutes after it started. So the emails are going out in blasts across time. And so you can sign up for an SMS notification, text message notification, which I think goes out immediately as we go live. And that should be on the link there.
Yes.
In the email that you did get. So you can sign up for immediate notifications to know when we're going live. And that is for a text message. And we don't abuse that power and privilege of having your number. You'll just get notified when we're live.
For now. No, just kidding. Forever. No, and also we go live Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 11 a.m. That's currently our schedule. So
yes, true.
The notification is great, but you could also just mark it down. If you 11 a.m. Eastern, we've been going live for an hour. I'm going to convince Dr. Greg eventually to go for longer than an hour because we got through one topic today. We've taken no live phone calls. If we grow popular enough, we'll we might be a full-blown morning show. Maybe 3 hours of us every day, 5 days a week.
Good Lord.
But right now it's 3 days a week for an hour. So 11 a.m. Eastern. If people
nobody wants 3 hours of us every day.
Well, that's why we'll have callers to break us up and challenge us and argue with us and tell us where we're wrong.
Oh boy. Well, we do appreciate all your support. Please do keep us in your prayers. We are praying for all of you. Specifically, every day we pray for our clients, our students, our listeners, our followers, our everybody that looks to us for help. We pray for you. So and keep praying for us. All right. Till Wednesday.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah, see you Wednesday.